The problem with information today is that most of it is not good for you to acquire. There was a time when knowledge was driven by deep curiosity, not the surface level social media scrolling kind, but a real hunger to understand something from the mechanics upward, to research against yourself, to be eager to learn the opposing views so that there was a sincere element of learning, not just choosing sides because that's where your tribe stands. I don't know, is it just me or is it true that everybody seems to feel like they have to take a position, most likely that is on the team of the people that they associate most with, whether it's family, group thinking, or your political allegiances, or even maybe the school that you go to?
Yes, I agree. And it's probably because we should go back to the root of the very word information. There's the word form, right? So it is a piece of data that takes place within a framework. So we are all thinking, due to our education, due to our upbringing, etc., we are all operating within a certain framework. We have new pieces of data when they find their place within this framework, or not, but we always have this framework. This data becomes information. It is informing our view of the world, right?
Yeah.
It takes its place and it's part of this framework, or it can put this framework under question.
Right.
Right? What happens today is that we have no framework of reference and we are bombarded with data.
Yeah.
And data is very different from information. Data, they are just quartered points of or inputs that do not find any place in any framework of reference.
And those points of inputs could be also pretty questionable depending on how they were acquired. A lot of data is usually skewed towards the perspective of what the person's trying to put out there.
Yes, and this is why the source of information or data is very important. We need to find a way to assess its truthfulness, right? But also, how do we process the data so it becomes information, so it can nourish our framework or make it deeper or make it different, you know? And this is why having these bits of information or so-called information is not sufficient. We need to learn how to process it. So having data is not enough. We need to learn how to think.
Yeah.
And this is my teaching of the Quran was this. The revelation is not only about providing us data that are truthful, but also teaching us how to think.
Right. How to use it in order to live optimally.
How to really think and process this data to make it something meaningful. This is why the Quran has this extraordinarily non-human structure.
Yeah.
Where things are not presented in a framework as they would be in a textbook.
Or an essay or something.
Or an essay.
Right.
It's a non-human way of presenting things where data is quartered all around the place. And the author is encouraging us again and again to gather all pieces of data and not forget one of them. Gather everything, and then a picture emerges. It's
right.
What is called in philosophy Gestalt, where if you provide to someone a point, and a line, and a line, and a circle, it means nothing. But if you put it, it can make a face.
Yeah.
Right? So, and this is this kind of meaning that emerges from getting the correct information, but also knowing how to process it. And one of the main danger is that we gather data and we make a framework by ignoring some pieces of data. We need to make a framework, and to make our framework deal with all data we receive, but we have to be careful that they are true.
And unfortunately, some people do even take the Quran and they conveniently omit some of the data that doesn't suit them in books like in scriptures like that as well, right? So I think it goes back to the human application of information.
Yes. So there is a very striking example in the Quran. There is this order to the angels to bow to Adam.
Yeah.
After he has received the knowledge of the names. It's very mysterious. And they all bow, We don't know exactly what is all referring to.
Yeah.
Probably not only the angels. But you have 7 times in the Quran this episode that is narrated. 6 times the nature of the creature that refused to bow, that is Iblis, is not mentioned because it's not the point of the verse. But in one of them, it is mentioned that he was one of the jinn.
Right.
So not an angel.
Right.
He doesn't say he became a jinn or he was one of the jinn. And many people, strangely enough, because it is so seductive, the order is given to the angels to bow and they all bow except Iblis.
And we should point out that a jinn is a fire being. It's not an angel.
Yeah.
Right.
It's very clear that according to an alchemic view, if you want, it's a different way of looking at things, not through molecules and matter, but through principles. Men or humans are made of water and earth or dust or whatever. And the jinn are made of fire and wind. And the angels are made of nur.
Light.
Which is light, but it's not the photon. It's not the electromagnetic. It's a spiritual light, right? So in one of these verses, very clear, he was one of the jinn. So if you forget this verse and just concentrate on the 6 remaining where the nature is not the point of the verse, you can imagine he was an angel. And now you enter some shenanigans like he was an angel, he was amongst the angels.
Then he fell from grace.
Then he fell, then he became a jinn or whatever. This is not what the text says. The text says, Kana min a jinn, it means he was one of the jinn.
Okay.
So this is how we learn not to forget one element, because if we forget one piece of information or data, we reach the wrong conclusion.
And we inadvertently change the story.
Absolutely, because we enter now a realm of imagination.
Yeah.
Just trying to make sense of what is ambiguous.
So what doesn't make sense shouldn't be forced.
No.
That's one of the lessons, is if something doesn't make sense, don't force it into a certain conclusion in your mind that is suitable or convenient to you.
Yes, and this is a very ancient way of thinking, of teaching philosophy, for example. Socrates, the master of Plato, or supposed master of Plato. Maybe it's possible that Plato made him up, as this figure of wisdom. The first step is I know only one thing, is I know nothing. Okay, and it's the first wisdom, truth. And there should be a strong barrier between what you know and what you don't know.
Yeah.
And in order for data to cross this barrier, it needs to be weighted accurately. Okay. So when you imagine we only had 6 verses, so an order is given to the angels to bow to Adam, and they all bow except Iblis. It is ambiguous because all, what does it refer to? It seems very likely that it's referring to all the angels, but it's not said. They all bow.
Right. So we shouldn't conclude.
No, we should be very careful.
Any particular category.
We should be careful.
Right.
Because, in fact, the spiritual world and or the creation of Allah is very hierarchical. So, and anyone who is living in a traditional society understands this. If you have a meeting with all, let's say, an army, there's a hierarchy. The generals, the colonels, the captains, and the foot soldiers, right? And imagine they are gathered in a room, meaning they are all there, and the king makes enter someone totally unknown and orders the generals to bow to this unknown person. They all bow. If the order is given to the generals, do you think that the foot soldier is going to remain standing?
No, they'll bow as well.
So the order is given to the angels, who are the highest spiritual creatures.
Right.
And they all bow, meaning all creatures bow.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So the conclusion that all refers only to the angels is just a matter of education.
Right.
Of understanding.
It's an assumption.
It's an assumption.
Yeah.
If we don't recognize this, fortunately, there is a 7th verse that makes it very clear. He was one of the jinn.
Right.
Okay? So this is how Allah is teaching us not only how to think while providing correct information.
Yeah, and how to deal with the information that we're being given. And that's so well said, because now knowledge is empty, almost always gossipy and divisively untrue. Oftentimes it's about an agenda or some sort of a narrative that's supposed to be put out there. Even when we're talking about geopolitics or banking or any serious subject, health, the medical field, I mean, it's just either mudslinging and character assassinating in order to prove yourself right, or a direct attempt to misguide and control. And at some point, there has to be an awakening to this. I mean, at some point, there has to be this mass demand for truth. And people are starved right now for the truth, and maybe they don't even know it. But at some point they'll wake up and say, I now understand that I'm starving for the truth.
Yeah, and it's really becoming the forbidden word, right? Because if you say this is true, the culture now is framing this as you trying to impose an opinion.
Yeah.
There is no more truth. There is only opinions. There are always points of views, and I'm entitled to my point of view, right? So when you invoke this word true, it is very difficult to do it today because it's true that this very concept of truth has been abused.
Yeah.
Very much.
But it no longer seems to be the priority. That's what's really shocking. Telling the truth and even demanding the truth doesn't seem to be the priority. Winning an argument seems to be the priority. Convincing seems to be the priority. So do it at any cost is the way I see it. And that is so wrong, and that's got to be called out for what it is.
Oh, it has been called out for a long time. Even Plato and Socrates they talk about these people who are putting, convincing others above anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So this is part of the human, psyche, trying to win over at any cost, including lies.
I understand, but as a Muslim, we come from a history of striving for knowledge with a passion, but never to cross lines by, for example, attacking people's character or having a go at other people's opinions, or even categorizing them in certain, putting labels on them so that we can start almost character destructing them. And that doesn't feel right. And I wonder at what point there's going to be a turning point. Today, we have more information than ever. So that's not the problem. We have a lot of information, but it's mostly garbage, really a waste of headspace. Yet we stuff our heads with it anyway. And I think a part of the problem is because it's being dumped on us. We have no choice but to go and be fed the headlines that are pretty much across the board all the same, or storylines about people that we don't care about. I mean, celebrities and famous people and who knows what that have done what to get to the positions that they're in. Why should we care? We don't care. Yet it's being dumped on us, and it's offensive. And at what point do we say, no, we're shutting all of this off and really going to go after the truth? And then how do we get to go after the truth? Where do we go for that?
Yeah, there is a French philosopher called Pascal who said all is diverting, like a king or someone who is in his room and thinking about his life without distractions is full of misery. So it's a way also to escape. It's all diversion. Divertare means to turn away.
Right. So you mean avoid your own problems by thinking or focusing on other people's life stories and gossipy narratives.
Yes, it's something that has been building up in the 20th century, the building of a fake world. It's like a fantasy world.
Yeah.
That is totally disconnected and more disconnected from reality.
But it's almost like the media has figured out that the formula is to make it sound like gossip, because for some reason, gossip is very appealing, I guess, in their minds to people.
It's entertainment.
Yeah. So they've made the news entertaining in a gossipy way. And that's offensive. That's offensive to any critical thinker who really wants to know the news, who really wants truth.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So, with all these apps, and I mean, firstly, it's not humanly impossible to take in the information that comes to us every day. And with any degree of dissection, we don't have the time to critically think. So we just do take it in, we consume it, and it's being told to us. So we're really not seeking knowledge. We're just sort of opening our brains up to have someone just pour something in it. So what do? We parrot it, and worse, we pass it on as if we've now become the experts of it. And we just aren't experts. We won't be experts until we make an effort to really go out there and seek knowledge in a proper way. But I think it's lost on us what that way is. it is critical that information is analyzed and understood before we accept it as truth, because today more than ever, it's driven by someone else's perspective or even plan. And, they want you to be a part of that plan. That's how it works. Our brains are being attacked and we often lose the fight and just accept what's being pushed on us. And before we know it, it's a non-thinking society that's just following the instructions of what we're being told to do or think.
Yes, I would call it a narrative. Okay, everything is part of a narrative, and it's several layers. A narrative to make things seducing you because it is, I don't know, appealing to your fears, to your appeal for drama. And also there is this probably conscious decision to overload people with data, cholinergic information, so much that you cannot process it.
Yeah.
And I see more and more people who have wised up, to this. They understand that it really darkens the heart to have access to all this data, and they just quit, meaning that they restrict their views and their world to their life and are not interested anymore in what's happening around them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a kind of also an effect that is negative, because if you feel that you are disconnected from this world, dark force is still operating, and when you realize that this world contains a lot of victims of nefarious practices, like they talk about pollution or things like this, people are falling victims of it. You face also people who say, well, life is life, and people die and everything will be solved on the day of judgment. So why would you care? And it triggers in people a kind of passivity towards what's happening around us. Passivity, like, I can't bear it, so I will restrict to my own life and not care anymore about others.
Which is also not a healthy approach. That's also not a good approach, because then you're not really partaking in life as you should. You should be making the world a better place. You should be trying to learn and understand. And maybe the first place that we start, given today's environment, is that we just become untrusting. Why should we trust the talking box, which is called the TV set or the radio or the internet? Why should we trust anything we hear? We need to take a deeper dive and really figure out who are these sources? Where are they coming from? Where does their money come from? And how do we decipher what is reliable and what's not? And that's a little bit of a tough exercise, but we've all got to undergo it.
Yes, and the usual question the police is asking in any investigation is cui bono, who benefits?
Yeah.
And this is something people tend to forget. Who benefits, Why am I being told this? And where is it leading me if I accept it?
Exactly. And I think we need to also ask, why does everything sound so scripted? Why are all the headlines pretty much parroting each other? Why do all the stories sound similar to one another? You don't get a different story or a fresh perspective necessarily in the mainstream media until you start digging deeper and going to off the beaten path sources. And sometimes that's citizen journalists that are on the ground somewhere, and they've either been canceled or deleted, or they're being persecuted. And they have something to say. So you try to hear their voices, which are a far cry from what the mainstream is trying to do. And that could be an indication of a control agenda when everything sounds so scripted that by parroting it, it's a way of brainwashing us into believing it.
Yes, in any matter, my conclusion has been that you should always listen to all sides.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you have one side pointing to the shortcomings of the other side, and you can then investigate this shortcoming. You don't need to be a specialist of everything. We are also having these ridiculous, discussions where someone is pointing something obvious in the matter of health, for example, and immediately there is, but you are not a doctor. So imagine someone is quoting a study saying that, green tea is actually more damaging to the DNA through, oxidation than
milk.
Yeah. And this is an actual study. And you're quoting this study and people are saying you're not a doctor.
Right.
So if I say the Earth is turning around the sun, I could be said that you're not an astronomer.
Yeah.
So we are reaching a point where these mechanisms of defense, instead of addressing the argument, because we as humans, we don't have to be specialized in everything, but we have, I think, according to each possibilities in time, investigation, etc., we can reach conclusions.
Yeah.
Especially when one side is refusing the debate with another side.
Right.
And you see something is fishy. And you can go and find more sources, etc., and get clarity on many subjects. And I do that for many subjects. Like if you're interested in science and you go this whole push towards quantum physics, and it is very interesting, but it is so complicated and based on equations. But it led some results. But when you understand that people who have a broader view, that, for example, the whole quantum physics is based on the axiom, the postulate, that events happen without any cause. Okay, this is at the core of the theory. Now it's up to you to accept it or not.
Yeah.
But, the principle of causality, that if something happens, there is a cause to it. It seems pretty foundational to the way this universe works. Right? So you have a theory that gets rid of this. Everything is probability. There's no cause to events. Anything can happen at any point.
Yeah.
Right? But still, it leads some results and some practicality. You can use GPS through this. You can, send satellites and etc. So it works. It works, but does the underlying theory true or not? Now, many people are questioning it, right? Because it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So something can be true and not being accessible yet, and something can be false and lead to results that are actionable.
Yeah.
And this is a trap. Yeah, I can build a model like I'm in the morning at 6 a.m. You have some chicken that is just singing, and the sun rises. So my model is that the singing of the rooster that makes the sun rise, and I can test the theory. Each time it sings, the sun rises.
Yeah.
So does it work? It works, but
Right.
it's totally wrong.
Right.
And in many fields, we are in this situation, by the power of calculation, by forcing things, we may miss tremendous discoveries.
But it goes back to your example of the data in the Quran. Look at all the data at hand. Don't just look at one piece of information.
Yes.
In the case where you said there were 7 points, that were repeated at different parts of the Quran. But if you just look at one of them, you're going to be at a loss. So you can't make conclusions without understanding what data you have at hand.
There's a brilliant example. The relativity theory of that Einstein actually took from Poincaré, but whatever. It states that the speed of light in void is constant.
Yeah.
Doesn't change, right? Whatever the reference point, it's always the same. It's c.
Right.
There were measurements of the speed of light in 2 different directions in void made by Michelson. He was the head of the Academy of Science of America in the 20s. And he found a difference. So the speed of light is not constant, right?
Yeah.
But these results were not accepted then, despite his trying to do the best measurement possible. People saying there must be a problem in the measurements, right? And he was someone with a lot of credibility. But because, again, the theory of relativity yielded some results in fundamental physics. But if c, and this is Einstein saying it, if the light speed is not constant, then the whole theory falls and we need to find something better, right? So until the year 2000, there was no confirmation of this, but in France, the Institute of Poids and Mesures redid the measurement of the speed of light under the supervision of a Nobel Prize of economy, but he was also a great scientist, Maurice Allais, and he found it was not constant. So now, have you heard any headlines saying, well, the whole assumption beyond relativity is wrong, and now we have to, give credit to Einstein, who said that if it's not constant, that the whole theory is wrong?
Right.
No, we just ignore this piece of data, which is a great information.
Yeah.
It's a great information because sticking to this probably prevents us from finding something better. and something more suitable to this universe, to understanding the laws that Allah has willed.
Right.
Right?
So it's a problem of not evolving.
It's
when
a
we
problem.
stagnate like that, we're not going anywhere.
It's a problem of stubbornness.
Yeah.
And because something works and we are comfortable with it, we just ignore. It's like
that's pretty destructive.
we would ignore one verse of the Quran because it doesn't suit us.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit our framework.
Or just for the fact that we don't get it.
Because,
so it must not be important if it doesn't.
But it's clear.
Make sense.
It's
right?
it's like we read the 6 verses that and we deduce from the ambiguity of the verses that Iblis is an angel. Then we can go into many theories.
Yeah.
He was the best of angels, and he was so pure as an angel that he refused the order because he loved only God, and he refused to bow to anyone than God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his purity was his fall, But the text doesn't say that.
Yeah.
Nowhere in the Quran is any importance given to Iblis, that he was the best of anything.
Yeah.
He's just a little jinn,
right?
Who just got blinded by his ego.
Yeah.
The first word he says is Ana, me.
Right.
I'm better than him.
Which tells you everything that you need to know.
Explaining to God that he is made of fire and air, and this one is made of mud and water. And so who are you, God, to ask me to bow to something inferior to me? And he's explaining to Allah the superiority of him over Adam, When the point is not that he's made of this or this. The point is that Adam has the knowledge of the names, right?
I just find it so interesting that he's trying to convince Allah that he is superior to Adam.
Yes.
I mean, he's challenging the creator.
Sure, and Allah gives him many chances. Mm-hmm. What made you refuse? Trying to make him think about this. Mm-hmm. But now, if we have this wonderful theory of, and this is called Satanism. This is to worship or to put Iblis in such an elevated position. Yeah. That he would deserve. I mean, the poor guy, he was so pure and he refused, because he loved only God,
Yeah.
Now we are giving him so much importance.
Yeah, we elevated him and then we dropped him.
Yeah, so we have this theory that is very seducing because it's so romantic. Mm-hmm. And we bump into this 7th verse that says that he was one of the jinn. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, it doesn't fit my framework now. Yeah. So I refuse. The speed of light is not constant. I can't. I ignore it because I love this relativity theory so much, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it's not an approximation of some truth, but it's not true, right? Einstein said it. So maybe continue to use it, but let's not make it an absolute.
I wonder how much of it is decision fatigue. With all the information that's going on today, I was reading that Steve Jobs would wear the same blue jeans and black turtleneck every day, and Zuckerberg the same gray hoodie, so that they could eliminate their decision fatigue because there was just so much to process on a day-to-day basis with our minds that, maybe some things we just need to leave aside and not burden ourselves to make decisions, so that when it comes time to making important decisions, like on our health or relationships or our careers, that we can really put that due time in to make sure that we don't make any mistakes on those decisions, and maybe leave aside the decisions on what am I going to wear today.
Yes. I mean, in general, we humans, we are very fragile in dealing with information or data. And this is why, again and again, Allah tells us that the one to whom Allah gives no nur has no nur. Nur being the information.
Yeah.
That is related and linked to him.
Yeah. Okay. A lot of people simplify nur as light, but light can also be information. It can reach you in a certain way.
Light is an English word.
Yeah.
Okay. And we could call it the spiritual light.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's not the light like the one.
No.
The electromagnetic phenomenon.
Yeah. It's a lot more robust than that because it comes in the form of inspiration and information.
Yes. And what I was taught is that the conduit for light to come into you and inform you in the correct way, coming from him, it's a ruh.
Right.
And many and all, let's say, precautions related to religious and spirituality in general, the fact that lying, mischieving, stealing, all these things, they just narrow this conduit of the ruh into you and providing the light. Mm-hmm. And you reach a point where your heart is dark and you don't see anymore. Mm-hmm. What is true from what is wrong. So we need this guidance called the hidayah we need to be guided, and Allah is the best of guides.
Right.
And without His nur, I'm afraid we can end up in constructing framework that are absolutely not true.
Well, you do see that in prison movies where you exhaust the prisoner's mind so much, you torture them, you deprive them of sleep and information, and to a point where they're just at a much easier place to control. And I wonder if, to a certain degree, that kind of psychology is being used to the general masses. Where they're just being bombarded by fear and by, if you don't do this, then this will happen. And, make sure you don't, you prevent this from happening to your family. And so you have, a population that's so worried all the time. And so that fear drives them to say, okay, tell me what I should do. And then they turn to the information that's closest to them, which usually is the mainstream information, and they do what they're told to do. It's definitely doesn't seem like an accident oftentimes, because it certainly does fall into a very convenient structure, and people do line up conveniently most of the time. So it sounds pretty destructive to me.
No, it is. But at the same time, how many people are really reading articles? They are reading headlines.
Exactly. And they don't have time.
They don't have time. We, in general, don't have time. And it also happens in scientific studies. It's fascinating that you have an abstract that is supposed to summarize the findings of a study, but the abstract is totally contradicting the raw data.
Yeah.
So meaning people have in mind a result, they make the experiment to test an hypothesis, the results do not lead to where they want, and they will still put the abstract according to their preconceived idea. And many people will just read the abstract,
Right.
And this happens again and again. In fact, there is a kind of secret or mystery in this world that is entirely under the authority and guidance of Allah, because He's Al-Muhaymin, is the one who controls everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you have dark forces who are trying to trick us into, being disconnected from this light. Mm-hmm. But it has to be a voluntary act.
So we have to agree to be distracted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the whole point is to charge us so that when the trial comes and the day of judgment comes, we cannot say we were forced. Because if forcing someone is not responsible, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Now, if you want to make someone fall, you need to trick him. But at the same time, you need to say things as they are. Mm-hmm. So there's always a way to see that it doesn't fit, it doesn't work. And this is striking. The French saying that said, "Le diable montre toujours le bout de sa queue," meaning the devil is always showing the spear of its tail. So there's always something that is either contradictory or that should alert you that it's not correct.
And sometimes you need to trust your gut feeling. I mean, sometimes things just sound so contrived, and you need to believe that that's a signal to, at the very least, dig deeper.
Yes, and I'm always struck that in face of certain questions that seems very complicated, people with no education or formal education, what we call simple people, they have the right reaction because they are connected to truth. They know inside out. They don't know why, but no. But you have the postdoc PhDs that just fall into the trap.
Yeah.
Because they just have switched off this safety mechanism, which is to be linked to Allah or to the Nur. And basically you get informed the right way and guided.
But that isn't that so dangerous that they don't do that? I wonder what it is about the education system that builds that level of ego to such a degree where you actually are convinced that you don't need the element of God and the guidance that's outside of you, that you actually start to believe that everything that you need is within you and within your mental capacity and your ability to make decisions and control your own life.
Yes, it's extraordinary because if you look at the story of science, all great discoveries were all made by accident, either by someone dreaming of something or totally accidentally finding something.
And therein is a huge message for these scientists who believe that they don't need anything outside of themselves.
Exactly. And in fact, when you study, again, the story of science and the lives of great scientists, you always find that none of them are atheists. Yeah. They all know. The more you know And the more you're convinced that something is organizing all this,
Yeah.
you know?
So you become a believer with,
Yes.
with proper education. So a lot of people are beginning to wake up to the flaws of the education system to such a large degree where they're actually convinced that they need to pull their kids out of the school system and take matters into their own hands, which I don't think is such a bad idea given all the things that we know, especially in the last couple of years. The conclusion that I've come to is that we must peel ourselves away. Not only from the education system, yes. I mean, I think colleges are very damaging. I think kids go into college and they come out as monsters, really. They're unthinking and unfeeling beings. They may be able to do a job, whether it's engineering or lawyering or accounting or a teacher, but they've lost a certain element of their spirit. And peeling ourselves away is not just for our sanity. It really is for our own protection. It's become that serious. Yeah. People listened to the news in the lockdown and they were told many false things and many people died. We know that today. People followed the instructions and the lockdown was a great control tool. It got people where this control tool wanted them to be. Again, the highest form of punishment in prison is solitary confinement, isn't it? It can make a person crazy. It's frightening to be alone. So to be locked down as we were on a mass level in the world, one can say that no one was prepared for it. And they got, sort of like a very difficult awakening. And it really can, take over your mind and break you down until you comply. Because when you're all alone, it's much easier to control you. And that's what they do in prison is anytime someone has to go through the highest form of punishment, they put them in isolation. And then they bring them out and they deal with the person. And in a way, we all went through that in those years of the lockdown, which may be coming up again.
Yeah, it was a great social experiment. There's something that could be worse than solitary confinement is to be locked up with people that you can bear.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
And it's led to tremendous problems,
Well, it showed itself, didn't it? During the lockdowns, there were a lot of issues on who we really are and how we really do relate to others. And I think right now our biggest challenge as humanity is to keep sane and to stick to a real purpose in life. I think people have lost track of that. Now it's all about survival. How do I stay alive and how do I just make enough money to get by and get my family by? And I think we need to put that aside, put those worries aside and really stop for a moment and practice being alone because we don't know what's around the corner, but we do know that if we can become better thinkers in times of isolation and in times of being with others that, like you said, we may or may not get along with, that may be a skill that may be the defining factor for our lives going forward.
Yes, but you could say, it's a shortcut, but it's so true that if you are with Allah, if you are with God, you're never alone.
Exactly. So get to know God. That's the point though, right? The point of being alone is to know that you're not alone. The point of being alone is to get the best advice that surrounds you. And that is a higher source of that advice. And take hold of your own life. And for sure, don't let them get any part of it. The media is the most self-involved game out there. They don't care about us. They care about what we can do for them to control us and to lead us on what to believe. They use bully tactics in a way to achieve this. They show us how people get canceled for saying things that they shouldn't be saying. They get to tell us what they deem as wrong, and we need to toe that same line. They demand that people who don't think a certain way should be called intolerant or racist. That's what's going on out there. And we need to get a hold of ourselves and make sure that we don't fall for that and we don't become a part of that control game.
Yes, I agree. And it's again coming back to a framework that is true.
But do we drown out the noise? What's our first step? Do we stay in silence and finally feel understand what peace feels like? Is that how we start to empower ourselves before we get to something that we don't want for ourselves, which is what's happening right now? A lot of people are at a place in life after the lockdowns, after all the mandates and instructions we were given, they're at a place where they don't want to be. So where do we start to regain control of our lives and our own information?
I think it probably starts with having clear ideas and also building a community of like-minded people. You know?
But a community where you don't get so busy socializing and time wasting. We have to be careful with what that community means to us.
Yes.
I know a lot of youth, not even youth, I know people older than me that are busy working really hard on their day jobs in their offices or in their home projects or work. And then they get ready, go out to dinner, go out with friends or whatever. Where is that time to really think and reflect and to read a headline and say, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. Or wait a minute, okay, that may sound fine to me, but I'm gonna argue against myself and make it not sound fine to me until I hear both sides and then decide. So, finding a community is important, but maybe we need to define how we find that community so that it's the right community.
Absolutely. And this is up to each of us to define all these fine lines, There's also the problem of authority.
Yeah.
Who do we look up to?
But then when we decide who we look up to, let's follow their money. Let's figure out where they're getting funding from or where their money is coming from and how they're using it. A lot of the time it does boil down to money and power. Who's got the money and the power behind whatever thought process is happening?
Yes, and we know also a very common tactic to put someone on the forefront that is very knowledgeable and wise, and after a while is just misleading people. So following a leader should not be blind. We have references, that the truth is above all what we look for, right?
Yeah.
If someone can help us towards it, fine. But if it starts to deviate, we're not following a person. We're following the truth. And the truth ultimately is Allah.
Of course. The truth absolutely is God, and what we receive from God is the ultimate protection that we have. And perhaps if anyone is in a place where they don't understand that, or they don't understand really what's been happening, maybe one of the starting spots also is to learn to unlearn. Maybe we need to unlearn a lot. Maybe we need to sort of hit a type of a reset button. Most importantly, leave all the news and the information that is absolutely devoid of soul and, not fruitful and primarily gossipy, as we said earlier. Leave the celebrities. Who cares who's married and not married and who's upset and who's fighting with whose family? It really is a distraction that is so toxic for our minds. And we need to be away from that as far as possible. These personalities and luxury brands never wanted anything good for us. I can assure you these celebrities don't know that you exist, or these families who are having problems with each other are just doing it for show and don't care really about your family and what's happening to you. They just want you so that they can increase their numbers of following. And bottom line, money. That's the truth. So at this point, can we all at least come to an agreement that our starting point is to maybe just unlearn what we've learned, especially in these last couple of years, and try again to really hit that truth target as sincerely as we can?
Yes, there's also a very strong emphasis in the Quran upon silence. There's also these moments where you can be silent and you can preserve these moments of silence so that things become more clear to you. Yeah.